Order. Good morning and welcome to the Cradle-to-Career's Governing Board meeting today. My name is Robert Tagorda. I serve as the chair of the Governing Board, which is meeting in person today at the Foundation for California Community Colleges in Sacramento. I want to welcome and thank the members of the public who have joined us, both in person as well as virtually this morning. Next slide. I'm going to go over some housekeeping details, which are really important. First, a quick note on interpretation services. Today, we have ASL interpreters helping us interpret the meeting. Please note that the interpreter will be pinned to the screen, so it is visible for all members of the public during the meeting. Also, a reminder for all members speaking today, we ask that when you introduce yourselves and say your job title or affiliation, please say your name slowly and then pause briefly before proceeding with your comments. So I'll model this for the group. Robert Tagorda, Cradle-to-Career Chair. Thanks for your compliance to this. This will ensure that everything is appropriately translated. And thank you very much as well to Paula DeMuro and Dina Fisher, who will be interpreting for us today. Next, we will also be offering translation services in Spanish. To listen to comments given in Spanish, please select the globe icon at the bottom of the screen that says interpretation. Then select language interpretation audio and your language, such as Spanish. You will then hear a live rendering of the comments in Spanish. I'm going to pause here for a moment for our interpreter to translate. Thank you to Jeanette Hernandez and Alda Renteria for your help today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. We will be providing interpreting services, and briefly, we do encourage all speakers to speak at a moderate pace. That way, the interpreters can faithfully convey your message accurately and faithfully. Thank you so much, and we will be reminding you in case if you tend to speed up, especially when reading a document. I will provide this briefly in Spanish as well. Muy buenos días a todos ustedes. Vamos a estar proporcionando servicios de interpretación el día de hoy. En la parte inferior de su pantalla, usted verá un icono en forma de un mundo. Favor de presionar ese icono y seleccionar español. Una vez que lo haya seleccionado, favor de presionarlo nuevamente y poner audio en silencio para que escuche la interpretación en vivo y en sintonía. Si tiene algún problema técnico, favor de alzar su mano o poner la mano virtual y con mucho gusto lo apoyaremos. Que tenga una buena reunión. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you, Aldo.
Appreciate it.
I wanted to provide the group with an overview of today's agenda, as well as go over some of the critical logistical details. First, in total, there are 22 agenda items. Our agenda, which is posted on the C2C website, specifically notes the agenda items that we will be accepting public comment on. Today, members will be voting on 7 agenda items, and there will be 9 opportunities for the public to engage with the governing board. We will also be going into closed session during this meeting. Should there be any reportable, anything reportable post-closed session, I'll make sure to report this out when we reconvene in open session. We intend to open it up for general public comment at 2 points in today's meeting, once this morning and again at the end of the meeting as agenda. If you are a member of the public with us here in Sacramento and you'd like to make a comment, I request that you complete a speaker slip so I can call you by name at the appropriate time, and that the record of this meeting can be full and complete. However, speaker slips are voluntary, so please give the speaker slips to Shannon Serrato. Shannon, she's waving at the corner of the room. I'll do my best to call upon everyone who supplied a slip for the agenda item and recognize those who wish to make a last-minute comment as well. Additionally, we may have members of the public who are joining us via Zoom. Please raise your hand to signal that you would like to make a comment. We will first take comments here in Sacramento, and then we will open up comments via Zoom. Although we traditionally allow 2 minutes per public comment, if we have 10 or more people that would like to comment on a particular agenda item, we will need to reduce speaking time to 1 minute to accommodate all the speakers. We do have a full agenda today and plan to end today's meeting in the late afternoon. We anticipate breaking for a 45-minute lunch around 12:35 p.m. and hope to have 2 5-minute breaks, one in the morning around 11 a.m. and one in the afternoon around 3:45 p.m. Okay, couple last minute notes before I call the meeting to order. Few reminders and updates. First, I ask that all members of the governing board and the public silence their phones. We also ask that all those in the room be as quiet as possible for accessibility purposes, as background noise can interfere with the interpretation services. Also, a reminder for members of the public who have joined us here in Sacramento, copies of meeting materials are available to you in the back left corner. Additionally, you may notice board members accessing their laptops, phones, or other devices during the meeting. They are using their devices to access board meeting materials that are in an electronic format. I also ask that when members of the governing board offer a comment, they say their name before speaking. The camera angles can be a little tricky in this room, so we'd like this meeting to be as transparent as possible for those who are joining us virtually. I appreciate your assistance with all these logistics today. And lastly, today's meeting will be run according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act as required by law. All right. Next slide. Establishment of quorum. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9:38 a.m. and ask that Mary Kay Cruz Jones please call the roll.
Member Tagorda.
Here.
Member Payne.
Present.
Member Cifuentes. Present. Designee Elias for Member Cochran. Member DeGear.
Present, but participating remotely because I have COVID.
Member Evans.
Here.
Member Fong. Here. Member Frigiueli.
Here.
Member Gonzalez Vasquez. Present. Member Hetz.
Here.
Designee Bierke for Member Irwin.
Here.
Member Jez.
Here.
Designee Stivers for Member Laird.
Here.
Member Lee.
Here.
Member Moldoff.
Here.
Member Nellam.
Present.
Member Ohanian. Member Romero.
Here.
Member Van Natten.
Here.
Member Vu.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Having established a quorum, we'll move on to some member announcements. First, I want to thank members Avinia and Winkler. Since our last meeting in November, the board has said goodbye to member Marisol Avinia and member Jerry Winkler. Member Avinia was a very active member, having served on the executive director review ad hoc committee and the advisory board selection ad hoc committee. I deeply appreciated her focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which she brought with her to her committee work and was impactful on the governing board. So, believe she is on the line right now. Marisol Avinia, are you on the line?
I am. Good
Fantastic.
morning.
All right. Well, we want to acknowledge and thank you once again for your service to our governing board, for your service to our state in this special capacity. And we continue to wish you well.
Thank you so much, Chair Tagorda and board members. It has been a privilege and an honor to serve alongside each one of you as a member of the inaugural board of the Cradle-to-Career Data System Board. I really admire and appreciate the commitment of each one of you on the board, commitment to equity and to the success of our diverse student population in California and to our communities. And I just want to convey my appreciations to each one of you, as well as to the C2C staff. You really are the ones that make the work happen, and you are all outstanding. Really appreciate the support you provided me during the time on the board, but really just appreciate the work that you put in day in and day out to keep things moving for our student populations. And I look forward to continuing to follow your work. And just a shout out to Shannon. The branding is looking beautiful from where I sit. Great job. And just thanks everyone, Marianne, Mary Kate, you're all just very supportive. Really appreciate you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Let's give her a warm. So once again, thank you to Member Avina. I'd also like to publicly acknowledge Member Winkler, who also actively participated on the Governance Manual Review Committee and both Executive Director Review Committees. His involvement was impactful, and we appreciate his unique expertise and perspectives. As we say goodbye and express our gratitude to our past members for their service, I'm also pleased to announce the appointment of Ana Luz Gonzalez Vasquez, Christopher J. Nellam, and Liberty Van Natten to the governing board. And at this time, I'd like to invite the Secretary of Government Operations, Amy Tong, for our next agenda item, which is the swearing in of our 3 new governing board members. Please.
Good morning, everyone. And if I could invite 3 members, please to join me up here. I think I can do all 3 at once, right? All right. While they're coming up, I just want to say hello to everyone, many familiar faces. And it is my honor and pleasure to be here to conduct the oath of office and welcoming all 3 of you to be here. Also want a special recognition to my colleague, Ben Chita, sitting in the background. Someone that probably doesn't need a lot of introduction as a strong advocate on the education system and all that from the governor's office. So without further ado, let's see, do we want a certain precision?
Yes,
This
so
way,
the
that way?
camera's right there.
Camera's
So
not-
if we could have members on one side of the secretary,
It's
please.
more important the camera sees that.
Yes, thank you so much.
There you go. And I do have more. This way.
This way.
This way.
This way. Chris, you're not in the shot.
This way. This way. All right.
One more. There you go. There you go.
Are we good?
Yes.
Yes, do not move. Make sure I'm not blocking their faces. in the camera. All right, so if I'm gonna do all 3 oaths at the same time, but each one of you would say your name, obviously. And if I may ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, your name? Liberty Van Natten Vasquez. Do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend. The Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the State of California. Against all enemies. Foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith. And allegiance. To the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely. Without any mental reservation. Or purpose of evasion. And that I will well. And faithfully. Discharge the duties. Upon which I am about to enter. All right, congratulations. So much. Their eyes, the whole, make sure they don't back out in the middle. So
That's
I
one.
think we can sign on the table.
Please.
All right.
So Liberty, we have yours. Yeah, great, thank you. And this and this. Brilliant, thank you so much.
Make sure I'll sign.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Right here.
And then, sorry, do we want one group photo? No pressure.
With the
Go
photo
back
view.
view.
Yes,
Wonderful.
absolutely. Yes. Looking at the camera.
Camera again?
Okay, yeah, let's do this again. Oh, I'll go. There you go.
There it is.
Oh, right here.
Sorry.
Ready?
It's fine.
All right.
Thanks
Congratulations
so
to you all,
much.
and have a great board day.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
everyone.
Secretary Tom. I'd like now just to provide brief introductions to our new governing board members. Ana Luz Gonzalez Vasquez, Doctor. Gonzalez Vasquez currently serves as the project director for Power in workforce development for UCLA Labor Center. She has over 20 years of experience conducting quantitative and qualitative research and using a participatory and popular education approach to engage research participants in the conceptualization and production of knowledge. We welcome you to our governing board. Next, I'd like to introduce Christopher J. Nellam. Dr. Nellam, he is the executive director of EdTrust West, an evidence-driven advocacy organization committed to advancing policies and practices to dismantle the racial and economic barriers embedded in the California education system. Welcome, Member Nellam. And Liberty Van Natten is an education research and evaluation administrator in the analysis, measurement, and accountability reporting division at the California Department of Education. So welcome you to our governing board. Members Gonzalez Vasquez, member Nellam, member Van Natten, they all bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to our board, and we're honored to have them as seated members of our board. For members of the public, more information about our new members, you can see that on our Cradle-to-Career website. I'd also like to thank the office for updating the page with helpful appointment information and term limits. I encourage everyone to take a look at the rebranded website. All right. Let's move on to the next agenda item, update from the governing board chair. This is a new standing agenda item that I propose to discuss broader policy and governing items that are required for our governing board to have some context, both for this particular meeting as well as our direction moving forward. During these updates, I intend to brief members on both new and upcoming items, also provide some reminders as well as gather some member input. Today, there are three areas I'd like to cover. First is an overview about the Statement of Economic Interest reporting and filing. Second is an executive director salary update. And then the creation of liaison roles. So I'd like to use this opportunity to look ahead as well as talk about some of the themes for today's particular meeting. Okay. First, the Form 700. Completing and filing a Statement of Economic Interest, also known as the Form 700, is a crucial requirement for every elected official and public officials who make or influence governmental decisions. The Form 700 is a critical document that ensures transparency and integrity in our role as governing board officials. It requires us to disclose certain financial interests, to maintain public trust, and uphold our commitment to abstain from making or participating in governmental decisions that are deemed conflicts of interest. All members must complete a Form 700 within 30 days of assuming office, and then once annually thereafter. The annual deadline to complete and submit the Form 700 is on or before April 1, 2024. So all members must submit the form on time in order to avoid penalties or other consequences. If members have any questions on Form 700 reporting or filing, the office is available to assist. Members can obtain a Form 700 by contacting Mary Kay Cruz Jones, our Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships. Okay, so Form 700, that statement, and it's crucially important for us as governing board members and public officials. Okay, couple of other updates. At the August 2023 board meeting, the board voted to request a 5% increase to the executive director salary. This request was advanced by GovOps, but denied by CalHR. As board chair, I've asked GovOps to do a salary study to define the relevant comparison points for this decision. I'll continue to keep members informed of this information. So this is a follow-up to action that the board took. And I wanted to make sure, because that was something that we had voted on, that we would also be transparent with the public about the outcome of that. Naturally, it's been months since that time that we took action. But as board chair, I felt like it was my responsibility to understand the full scope for how decisions like this get made. And as a consequence, I'm commissioning this particular study. This has been accepted by GovOps in this proceeding, and then I will keep the board updated as this moves forward. Another update. I'd like to look ahead today's board meeting. In particular, I'd like to touch upon 4 key agenda items, which you see displayed here on this slide. And give everyone just a quick moment to look at those items. The agenda items are formation of the advisory board selection committee, review of the proposed changes to the governance manual, the presentation on the effective traits of a board member, and then updates from the governance survey. As we touch upon these individual items, we want to highlight and uplift the importance of ambassadorship and our roles as governing board members. We want to reinforce the importance of remaining mindful of our role as board members and wearing our human hats, if you will, when making decisions and holding discussions. This is a theme that we're going to touch upon today, right? As it's a priority of our governing board to continue to build and strengthen our governance culture. So just highlight those items on your agendas, and as we talk about them, we'll revisit these themes. Okay, next update. Liaison role. So in keeping with this idea of strengthening our governance culture, I'll be highlighting the Cradle-to-Career liaison roles. The creation and implementation of standing liaison roles for all aspects of C2C's work was initially presented to the governing board and approved at our November 1, 2023 governing board meeting. These roles present an opportunity for board members to enhance their connection with C2C's initiatives, offering a vital link to the organization's work. In addition, they establish a reliable mechanism for collecting member feedback and support, contributing to a robust structure for collaboration. By fostering a sense of ownership among board members, these roles play a key role in nurturing a governance culture, which is a priority highlighted during the adoption of our strategic plan at the August 9, 2023 board meeting. Today, there are a total of 5 liaison roles: CCGI liaison, community engagement advisory board liaison, data and tools advisory board liaison, design liaison, and an e-transcript liaison. The liaison position terms is set at 1 year starting in 2024 and concluding at the end of the calendar year. The current chair-elect is set to assume all chair responsibilities in July 2024 and will oversee liaison appointments for 2025. I'll now walk through our board. I'll now walk through our liaison appointments, which have been made. And for members of the public who would like to follow along or learn more about our new governing board liaisons, the following information is available on our C2C website. Okay. So I'm delighted to announce the appointment of the following individuals to serve as liaisons in their respective positions. In addition, a stand-in for each liaison position has also been selected. Member Evans has been selected to serve as the CCGI liaison responsible for providing an opinion of the tool. Member Cifuentes has been selected as the stand-in for this role. Thank you for stepping up to take on this work. Member Hetz has been selected to serve as the e-transcript liaison, responsible for providing an opinion of the tool. Member Moldov has been selected as the stand-in for this position. Thank you to the two of you for contributing your expertise. Member Lee has been selected to serve as the design liaison responsible for data visualization, data storytelling, and brand. Member Fong has been selected as the stand-in for this position. Please join me in taking this opportunity to congratulate each of our new liaisons and stand-ins with a round of applause. At the moment, we are looking for volunteers to fill the following 2 liaison positions and 2 volunteers to serve as stand-ins: Community Engagement Advisory Board Liaison and Data and Tools Advisory Board Liaison. So they function as liaisons for our 2 critical advisory boards. These liaison positions are responsible for providing updates at advisory board meetings and ensuring the board learns insights from the advisory board as well. Okay, before we move on to the next item on our agenda, I'd like to open up the floor for any member questions or comments and thinking about the theme of ambassadorship and the liaison vacancies. I'd also like to invite any member to share just their thoughts in general. So let's pause here for a moment for member questions and comments.
Question, Christopher Joelli, University of California. My apologies if I missed it. What was the selection process for the first 3 liaisons? Were they volunteer as well?
Correct,
Okay.
volunteer, and also in some cases assigned by the board chair,
Okay,
with consultation with the members who have
Okay.
been selected.
and will there be a formal call for volunteers for the remaining 2, or is it?
Yes, so for those who, want to volunteer or step up,
Okay,
can contact me or contact the office. And then at the next board meeting, we'll announce what those would look like.
okay, so reach out to you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If I may,
Yes.
so in other places where I've been, Gavin Payne, Chair-elect. In other places where I've been and participated, the role of the liaison has been pretty huge in being able to be that conduit board member to, especially advisory committee members, to be able to provide a great amount of information and context, especially that isn't necessarily the role of the staff that in supporting those organizations. So I'm really happy that we're doing this, and I think it's a huge thing, and I would encourage anybody to apply for the other 2 remaining positions. So those are really key ones.
Thank you. Other governing board members, questions or comments this time? Okay, so let's move on to our next agenda item, approval of the minutes from the November 1, 2023 quarterly board meeting. Members have all had the opportunity to review the meeting minutes from the November 1, 2023 quarterly board meeting. Would any member wish to make any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the November meeting minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Member Evans moves second.
Member Fong, a second.
I heard member Fong seconds. Before we vote, let's pause for public comment. If you want to comment on this agenda item, please note that comments should be limited to the November 2023 governing board meeting minutes. How many slips do we have?
We have no speaker slips.
Okay, no speaker slips at this time. Is there anyone via Zoom who would like to?
If anyone on Zoom would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. No one has raised their hand. We'll give it another moment. No hands raised.
Okay, so we'll close public comment on this item. We have a motion and a second. Mary Kay Cruz Jones, please call the roll.
Member Tagorda,
Yes.
Member Payne,
Aye.
Member Cifuentes. Designee Elias for Member Cochran. Member DeGear,
Yes.
Member Evans,
Yes.
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Frigielli,
Yes.
Member Gonzalez Vasquez.
Stay. No, not part of it.
Member Hetz,
Aye.
Member Designee Beer Key for Member Irwin.
Aye.
Member Jez,
Aye.
Designee Stivers for Member Laird.
Aye.
Member Lee,
Aye.
Member Moldoff,
Aye.
Member Nelum,
Staying.
Member Ohanian.
Yeah.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Van Natten, Member Vu.
Yes.
We have 3 abstentions and 16 ayes. The motion passes.
Wonderful. Moving on to agenda item 4. Approval of the minutes from the January 30, 2024 Governance Manual Committee meeting. I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. This particular committee convened twice since our November governing board meeting and concluded their work at the second meeting on January 30, 2024. At this time, I'd like to thank members of this committee, including members Payne, Cochran, Fong, and Frigielli for all of their work on this particular committee. The committee will not meet again this year, and we would like the meeting minutes to be available to the public. So we have brought the meeting minutes here today for a vote. Please note, only the members of the committee will be asked to vote on a particular item. Are there any additions or corrections from members of this committee to the January 30, 2024 Governance Manual Committee meeting minutes? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the Governance Manual Committee meeting minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Member Payne moves. A second?
Second.
Second from Member Romero. We have a motion and a second. Before we vote, let's pause for public comment. If you want to comment on this agenda item, please note that comments should be limited to the January 2024 Governance Manual Committee meeting minutes. Do we have any
No speaker slips,
slips? No slips here. And how about online?
no hands raised. If you'd like to make a comment on this item, please raise your hand. We'll give it another second. No hands raised. We can close public comment.
Public comments closed. We have a motion and a second, and now we'll do a roll call vote.
Member Tagorda,
Yes.
Designee Elias for Member Cochran,
Yes.
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Frigielli,
Yes.
Member Payne.
Aye.
5 ayes, the motion passes.
The motion passes. So now we'll move on to our next agenda item, update on the Cradle-to-Career office. I'd like to invite our Executive Director, Mary Ann Bates, to provide this update.
Thank you so much, Chair DeGorda. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all here this morning. What I'm going to do with my update is organize a couple of key updates according to the categories and buckets of the strategic plan that you all reviewed and approved last August. So going through the 4 major areas of our work and highlighting a few key updates, and then I'll talk about a few of the things that are on the horizon. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Office operations, one of our 4 main areas of work. So as you'll recall, the strategic plan goal that you had identified is that we are to establish and operate a new state entity that uses secure, effective, and efficient processes and procedures to earn and keep the trust of data providers and the public. And big shout out to Leslie Taylor, who leads this team. There's been a lot of ongoing work in the last 6 months, especially around procurements and working with the many contractors that we work with to advance this work. 2 things I really wanted to spotlight. One is that we have our new space for the office is now under construction at 400 R Street, just downstairs from where we've been happily occupying the space that Census had left us for the last 2 years, but really excited about what Leslie has done in designing a space that's really focused on events and engagement. So we'll be able to host you as a governing board there. We'll be able to host our advisory boards, our community meetings, and the space is really designed around that, in addition to space for our office to work. The other major update is that we have been growing and hiring and expanding the team. So as you know, we have 26 authorized positions, with many thanks to the 10 new positions that were approved in last year's budget. I can say that our team now has 26 members if we count our retired annuitants and fellows. So we've expanded quite a lot, even just since the last meeting. Let me highlight who's joined, if we can go to the next slide. So we have Christopher Seichow, who's our new operations and administrative assistant. We have RT Wasu, I believe is over here, our legal and governance analyst. We have Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, who works very closely with Mary Kate as our board liaison and governance specialists. We have 2 members, new members of our data programs team, Elizabeth Pirati and Emily Schneider. And we have a brand new executive fellow, Allison Garraby, who just joined us last week. So we're really excited about all of the new members on the team. We still have some active recruitments. So we are actively recruiting for Chief Information Security Officer. Our current Chief Information Security Officer is excellent, has been serving as a retired annuitant. So we have an active recruitment ongoing for a permanent person in that role. We have a senior data engineer position open, a communications specialist position open. So I always like to use these board meetings as an opportunity to highlight these positions. If you're dialing in and you're a member of the public, please apply, please share these positions widely. And I've been so grateful for all that you as board members have done to amplify these positions on your social media, to personally encourage people to apply, because this is an incredibly important aspect of our work. Next slide, please. Analytical data. So this is about the data system that we're building. This is about the dashboards, query builders, data request processes that will be layered on top of that. So as you'll remember, the strategic plan goal that you identified is to build a linked analytical data set that connects existing state level data on education and job outcomes that will empower decision makers to answer important questions. So a bit later in the agenda, you'll be hearing a detailed update from my colleague Dan Lamry about the work of the data infrastructure team. And then Ryan Estriato will also be giving an update about the dashboard. So you'll get more detail about this later today, especially around the work we've been doing with our partners since the data submission that happened just before your last meeting in October. And I'm happy to share that we're now moving from where we were last meeting of celebrating the very first data submission to moving into the regular cadence of data sharing. So we worked with our partners to identify the month of March as the month that works best for the annual data submissions. So starting in just a few days, we will again be opening the doors for the annual data submissions from our data partners, which will then happen every March moving forward. So just a personal reflection, I think it's really exciting to move from the first submission that we all celebrated at the last meeting to moving into a stage of routine data submissions each year. We're working on developing the first dashboards in tandem with that. You'll hear more about this later, but as we discussed last time, we'll be working on 2. One is around student pathways. So this is illuminating the path from high school to post-secondary, information about whether people are earning living wages. and also on teacher training. So as we've reported in past meetings, we'll be working on phase 1 of a teacher training and retention dashboard. And remember, the sequencing of the work we're building is that we're starting with dashboards first, and then we'll be adding the query builders where people can generate their own tables customized on the data. And then we'll be working on the researcher request process for the underlying data that will facilitate for our data providers. So that's a big picture update on the analytical data. Next slide. Practical tools for students. So remember, your strategic plan goal for this is to coordinate with partners to reduce barriers for applying to college and financial aid, and expand the number of students who benefit from these tools by linking real-time information across institutions and communicating about these options to students. So a few quick updates. One is the continued scaling of California colleges at EDU across the state. And I'm excited that later this afternoon, you'll be hearing directly from Tess Carmen DeRoy, who's the president of CCGI, with an update on their strategy and how they're working towards getting to scale. Also at our e-transcript task force meeting recently, announced the development of the California High School Transcript and Student Record Portability Standard. It's a mouthful. It's important because this provides an important foundation for enabling the kind of alignment that really enables barriers to be reduced for students and for the work that CCGI is doing with all of the partners to be streamlined. So we're very grateful for the work of all of the higher education segments and all of the relevant partners, CDE and others, in working on that transcript standard together with CCGI. And another update is coordination with the Community College Chancellor's Office for information on dual enrollment students. So again, we'll have more information on the work of CCGI this afternoon. Very grateful to Tess for being here to provide that update. Next slide. I also wanted to give you an update on the e-transcript task force. So remember, at your last meeting, you heard from Ben Cheetah in the governor's office, you heard from Chancellor Christian about how the work of e-transcript is connected with the proposed new master plan for career education. So that work has now kicked off. We had meetings in January and February for this e-transcript task force. And what the task force is doing is exploring options together with the Chancellor's office for a revamped e-transcript, and also exploring the potential for a California career passport. And I want to give a special shout out to Kathy Booth, who is working closely with us and facilitating this task force for us. She's also working closely with the governor's office on the master plan for career education process. So we've been very fortunate to have her be involved in both of those efforts, which is helping to connect it and ensure that it's coordinated. So coming up in March, we'll be talking about advising tools in that task force. In April, credit for prior learning. In May, competency-based education, workforce training, digital credentials and badges. And then in June, the task force will wrap up with proposing some recommendations for the master plan. So a lot of topics, a lot of depth to that. Special thanks to Member Hetz and Member Van Natten, who are serving on that task force as well. If you're a member of the public, these task force meetings are open to the public. You can dial in via Zoom as well. Next slide. All right, the next area of our work is around engagement. So I'll highlight from the strategic plan goal here that Cradle-to-Career will engage with communities to listen to and identify their information needs through our user-centered design work and community engagement activities. Since the last time you met, we've held 2 in-person community conversations. The first one here in Sacramento and a second in Oakland. With special thanks to Shannon Serrato and her team for putting those together. And these were an opportunity to hear directly from community members from each region. What matters to them for the build of the dashboards? And we gained direct feedback on the accompanying dashboard materials to share use cases with the public. And in tandem with this, our communications team developed and finalized their strategy for achieving the engagement strategic plan goals that you all had identified, both in the overall strategic plan and in the 12-month work plan for this year. So I really enjoyed going to those in-person events, I've often summarized this user-centered design and community engagement work as we need to listen first before we build, and then continue to listen so that we can ensure that the dashboards that we put out are useful and actually used by Californians. Next slide. Our advisory boards have also done some important work since the fall. So as you know, both advisory boards met in the fall and they identified and prioritized a number of specific recommendations, which then advanced to the feasibility study stage, which our office has been working on in collaboration with our data partners. So just want to give our data providers again a big thank you for all of the time that their staff have spent in working on these feasibility studies with us. The advisory boards are next going to meet in March, where they will hear the results of these feasibility studies and then decide what to bring to you at your May meeting. And I just want to, again, thank the advisory boards for their very detailed and engagement on this and reflect on the fact that providing recommendations on the data system is, I think, extra complicated and challenging at this stage because our dashboards are not yet live. We have information online about the data points, but not yet the full data dictionaries that we're going to be releasing. And so our advisory boards are providing recommendations and ideas in a context before all of that is live, and just want to give them a special thank you for working with us in the first round in this first year of going through this process together. Reflecting on that, if we look more to the longer term horizon, we can go to the next slide. As we reflected on that experience and in some of the conversations that I've had with members of the public, with advocates, with other organizations, I want to highlight that we're going to be exploring additional data domains, and these are identified in the 5-year timeline. For members of the public, if you're dialing in on our resources page, that I've been describing, as well as our 5-year timeline and the 12-month work plan. Those 3 documents sort of cascade and are organized in a similar fashion. And in that 5-year timeline, we've identified a number of additional domains for the data system. And as we explore those, we want to rely on a process similar to what Kathy Booth facilitated during the planning process. And the key to that is starting with the priority questions that the community, that the state most wants to answer. So in the planning process, it was those priority areas identified in the Cradle-to-Career Data System Act that led to the conversations that ultimately identified those 200 data points. So similarly, we want to start with priority questions, then look for feasible and valid data options, and do that in collaboration with our data partners, with you as the governing board, with our advisory boards, and with public input. So just want to highlight the upcoming domains. We have early learning and care. You'll be hearing more about that from Cal HHS later today too. Nonprofit and private higher education. We just had a webinar this week with AICCU around processes for bringing in data from their partners as well. We'll have workforce is another area that's identified in the 5-year timeline, and then more information on health and human services. So as we think about kind of the near term, we're focused on those first dashboards. That's what we're aiming for this year, in tandem with working with our partners on the practical tools, eTranscript, California Colleges.edu. On the longer term horizon, this is how we'll plan to think about those additional potential domains for the data system. All right, with that, I'm happy to conclude my update and happy to take any questions.
Thank you to our executive director. Let's open it up right now for any member questions or comments related to what you just heard in this presentation from our executive director.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
You talked about our new space. Are we gonna have our next board meeting there?
No, you will not have your next board meeting there. And I fear giving you a very specific date, as construction always has some variability in it, but we are very optimistic that in this calendar year, we shall move to that, but not for the May board meeting.
Other questions or comments from the governing board? Yes.
Randy Bierke designee for Assemblywoman Irwin. You talked under engagement, the community conversations that you had in Sacramento and Oakland. Do you have any plan for Southern California?
Yes, so we've identified that we want to have these community conversations in all regions of the state. So not only Southern California, but also the Central Valley. And Shannon and her team are currently actively working with partners on potential dates and locations for those. Thank you for asking that.
Other questions, comments? It's a quick question around the capacity of the team. Obviously, we have an ambitious strategic plan. We've got a lot of deliverables coming up. How do you foresee the, the capacity that we currently have right now, lining up with the deliverables that we're looking at? Are we at the capacity that we need? What potential challenges do we have moving forward that we should be aware of as a governing board?
Thank you for that question. I'm very grateful for the growth of the team. I think having 26 members on the team right now is very different from where we were a year ago. And so that's incredibly important for the work moving forward. A couple of things to reflect on your question. One is that I think it's very important for us to be mindful of the fact that our team is moving this work forward with many partners and contractors. So Dan Lamry, for instance, leads a large team of contractors, not only at Deloitte, but a number of other what we call strike teams who are moving this work forward. So the 26 people in our office are the permanent staff who are moving this work forward. But behind that, we also have multiple teams of contractors who are advancing the work. The work we're doing is ambitious and our governance structure is complex. So I do like to summarize the fact that now we have 26 authorized positions that still need to staff 53 board members in total. So that is a challenge. I'll just be honest, it's a challenge to try to ensure that we're adequately staffing all of you and keeping you as informed as possible, in addition to the advisory boards and our communities we're working with, advocates, researchers, and others who are also engaged in this work. So I think one of the main things that we're trying to do is ensuring that we have continuity of operation plans and specific plans in place, given that our team is small enough that everyone is playing a very critical role in different domains without a lot of backup, if you will. And so thinking about how we partner with government operations agencies, with our data providers, with our contractors, and internally to ensure that we have as much cross training happening as possible and as much backup as possible, structured in different ways, so that the work can move forward no matter what comes our way moving forward. So that's a very long-winded way of saying 26 is very different from just the small handful we started with less than 2 years ago. And also the work that's in our timeline is incredibly ambitious and will require continued help and collaboration from our partners and active engagement and deployment of a lot of contractors as well.
Yes, Member Nello.
Question, I think I know what this means, but can you just say more about the California, the passport you mentioned?
Yes, happy to. So this is a concept and an idea, not a tool that already exists. So in contrast to californiacolleges.edu or eTranscript California, it's not a pre-existing tool that one of our partners is already implementing. When Governor Newsom signed the Career Education Executive Order last August, one of the things he mentioned in comments to the press afterwards was the idea of a career passport. And the concept behind it is that there should be a way for people to demonstrate their skills to employers that's more flexible than, say, high school diploma, college diploma. So the idea would be to create a platform where people can share credentials, badges, other certificates, signals of skills in the labor market that can really support skills-based hiring. So that's the concept behind it and part of what we're exploring with our partners in the task force. Thank you for that question.
Tom Vu, AICCU. Following up on Chris's comment or question about the passport, has the has staff considered perhaps looking at third-party providers of such a tool already, or is staff really focused on creating something new?
So we asked West Ed to do a report on these concepts more broadly last summer, and then that work has continued through the e-transcript task force. And absolutely, the conversation is around looking what already exists and what approaches are being used elsewhere in the country is definitely a part of the conversation.
Have time for maybe a couple more comments or questions from the governing board. Any others? Yes.
Jessica Moldoff, California CNA Commission. So I'm wondering, so you mentioned that Dan in particular has like a lot of contractors under him. I'm wondering to what extent are contractors just to build it, or is this going to be like a long-term reliance on these contractors in order to keep the data system going throughout the years?
So the strategy of using contractors is a long-term plan. That said, the way that Dan has organized this, I think is very thoughtful, and that we're working not only with one major system integrator contractor, but also with other strike teams whose expertise is targeted to the specific technology stack that our team identified. So what we're trying to do is ensure that the data system office remains as the entity that provides the strategic decision-making and development of the data system. But we expect to work with contractors in a maintenance and operation mode moving forward as we continue to build out different aspects of the data system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. How about maybe one more question or comment? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank our Executive Director, Mary Ann Bates, for this report, as well as for her continued leadership of the initiatives that we're pushing forward. It requires extensive leadership, as you can imagine, to advance our strategic plan. So I commend you, Mary Ann, as well as all 26 members of the office for your continued efforts on behalf of Californians. Thank you so much. All right. Let's move on to our next item, which is also going to be spearheaded here by our executive director. She's going to be presenting on our next agenda item, which is discussion, public comment, and possible action on the 2024 governing board meeting dates. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you. So this one is fairly straightforward. At your last meeting, you voted on 2024 governing board meeting dates. In taking those dates into account, our office had looked at different public meetings of the various entities who are represented and tried to make sure that we align with all of that. Our staff, we are, as an office, are recommending pushing back the November meeting date until November 15th, so that the board meeting does not happen the day after the presidential election. So that's what's up for action for you to consider.
Thank you for that presentation. Let's see if there's a motion to approve this proposed change to our November board meeting date. Is there a motion?
Member Hetz, I'll move.
Member Hetz moves second.
Member Lee, I'll second.
Member Lee seconds. We have a motion and a second, and now we turn to public comment. If you want to comment on this agenda item, please note the comments should be limited to the 2024 governing board meeting dates. How many speaker slips?
No speaker slips. If there's somebody on Zoom that would like to comment on this, please raise your hand. I want to say that there's no one with raised hands, so we'll pause for a second. Seeing no hands raised, we can close public comment.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we've closed public comments, so we now turn to a roll call vote.
Thank you. Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Payne.
Aye.
Member Cifuentes.
Aye.
Designee Elias for Member Cochran. Member Evans.
Yes.
Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Frigielli.
Yes.
Member Gonzalez Vasquez.
Yes.
Member Hetz.
Yes.
Designee Bierkey for Member Irwin.
Aye.
Member Jez.
Yes.
Designee Stivers for Member Laird.
Yes.
Member Lee?
Aye.
Member Moldoff?
Aye.
Member Nellum?
Yes.
Member Ohanian?
Yes.
Member Romero?
Yes.
Member Vu?
Yes.
Member Van Natten?
Yes.
20 ayes, the motion passes.
Wonderful. So with the motion passing, we move on to the next item on our agenda. This is agenda item number 8. Presentation on commission on teacher credentialing contributions to the Cradle-to-Career data system. I'd like to invite our governing board member, David DeGear, who will be presenting on the Commission on Teacher Credentialing Contributions to C2C. Member DeGear will kick off this presentation virtually and introduce Kristen Calderon, a Harvard Strategic Data Fellow. As a reminder to members as well as the public, this presentation will be part of a series of ongoing presentations where we will be asking data providers to present at our quarterly board meetings. If you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. So thank you to Member DeGear for this presentation. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Tagorda. I'm really excited to be them as well. And with me or with you is Kristen Calderon, who is our Harvard Data Specialist, a Harvard Data Fellow. This has been part of a multi-year effort to mission, not just but the data, and through from the Olympics Foundation to and enroll her in the Harvard Strategic Data Program, as well as with a budget increase last year, added some new data positions. So I will now turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Tagorda and members of the governing board. For any audio that cut out, we can just assume he said good things, right? It's my pleasure to be here with you today and share about the ongoing partnership between the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing and the Cradle-to-Career data system. As David mentioned, I joined the commission last summer as a 2025 fellow of the Strategic Data Project, which is a network of researchers and data strategists across the United States working to advance the use of data in education. C2C's own Julie Lau is a co-fellow in cohort 15 of SDP, and Ryan Estrellada is an alumnus and current supervisor. So it's been wonderful to get to work with them.
Excuse me, this is ASL interpreter.
Sure.
I'm not able to really pick up very much of what you're saying, and if I could ask you to please speak a little slower.
Speak louder
And slower.
and slower.
And slower.
Okay, absolutely. It's been wonderful to get to work with them in multiple capacities and dream up ways to advance education and data and reporting in California. Next slide, please. In my time with you today, I'll first share a summary of the data set we submitted to Cradle-to-Career's teacher data dashboard in November 2023, as well as plans to continue expanding our contribution moving forward. Second, I will provide just a few of the examples of data dashboards that CTC makes available freely to the public on our website about California's teacher preparation programs and educator supply across the state. And thirdly, I will share a little about an innovative data environment CTC has built over the past 3 or 4 years to support the accreditation of teacher prep programs in the state's more than 100 approved institutions, called the Accreditation Data System. Next slide, please. The Commission submitted our initial data set to C2C in November 2023. This set had more than 4 million rows covering 10 years of teacher credential data in California. These data give a precise level of detail of California's credential documentation across the past 10 years. For example, the dimensions in the data set include the following: the title code or category of credential issued, such as multiple subject, single subject, or education specialist, the type of credential such as clear credential, emergency permits or waivers, demonstrated subject matter areas, authorizations, which can range from things like bilingual or English learner designations to specific grade level permissions, the issue date and expiration date of the credential, the institution that prepared the teacher where possible,
and whether this is a first-time credential issuance, a renewal, which is typically required every 5 years, or a revocation as a result of disciplinary action. Because of this level of detail, one California teacher may easily have 5 or 10 rows of their credentialing history included in the data set, which is how we get to that 4 million number. Since our initial submission in November, we've worked closely with C2C to determine areas we can supplement or expand our reporting moving forward, with 2 immediate goals to start. First, our IT team is currently working to add a column that provides the method by which a teacher demonstrated their subject matter competency, such as by their college coursework or by an exam. Second, we are committed to providing as much data as possible about teacher demographics as we work towards a teacher workforce that proportionately reflects California's student body. While our initial data set to C2C does include columns for race and gender, there's a prohibitively large amount of missingness in these areas. This is because the fields to self-report race and gender in the application for a credential were added relatively recently, and they remain a voluntary disclosure. However, we believe we can reduce the level of missingness by joining data from other places within CTC. For example, our preparation program completer surveys receive a high response rate, with the majority of respondents disclosing their gender and their race or ethnicity. Similarly, our exam partner Pearson has records of demographics from when teacher candidates complete an exam in their preparation program. So we are now launching an effort to join these data sources and increase the data quality of both of our organizations. We do anticipate some challenges, such as different disclosure points, offering a different number of options or varying level of specificity on race and ethnicity that will require careful remediation. And it should also be noted that there will be a recency bias in our addendum due to the fact that the commission oversees teacher credentialing, but not employment as a whole. After a teacher earns their clear credential, their touch points with CTC become fewer and farther between. So in the short term, we will most reliably be able to fill in this data for recent graduates. But in the long term, we are now beginning to engineer more detailed educator profiles that will carry through their career. Next slide, please. Moving on to CTC's public reporting, I want to highlight 3 dashboards that are available on our website. I've linked the ones I'm mentioning in the slides, which are available in the meeting agenda, but I also encourage anyone interested to explore all of our public reporting by going to ctc.ca.gov and simply clicking on the Data and Reports tab. The first dashboard I will highlight is California's approved institutions and programs. This is a dynamic and interactive dashboard that is updated daily. California is, of course, a large state with over 100 accredited institutions preparing teachers for their preliminary credential. These institutions are comprised of 4 major segments, including the California State University System, the University of California System, private and independent institutions, and local education agencies. An additional subset of local education agencies offer induction programs, bringing the total number of preparing institutions in the state to around 250. Induction programs consist of 2 years of support and mentorship for new teachers, culminating in their being recommended for their clear credential. Prospective teachers, education advocates, and other members of the public may have a hard time coming to understand the scope of prep programs across the state, including which institutions offer which programs. And that's where this dashboard can help. Users can filter down the list of programs and the corresponding map by credential type, program level, clinical pathways such as student teaching versus internship, segment, accreditation status, or geographical location at the region, county, or city level. As an example, let's say there's a prospective high school math teacher in the San Diego area that wants to stay close to home for her preparation. She can first filter the list by geolocation, keeping only the institutions in San Diego County, bringing this unapproachable 252 number down to the 18 institutions in her area. Next, she can filter for institutions that offer secondary teaching, single subject math programs, further winnowing her options down to 12 institutions. And finally, this prospect knows that financially she will need to work to support herself through her preparation. And so she is only interested in programs that offer an internship pathway where she can begin teaching and complete her preparation simultaneously. This brings her down to 8 institutions to choose from: 1 CSU school, 1 UC school, 4 private schools, and 2 local education agencies. So now she is free to compare tuition rates and financial aid against job openings near her and make the decision that is right for her. At the bottom of this dashboard's same webpage is another resource with the title, Explore Information about a Commission-Approved Institution. Let's say our prospective math teacher chose San Diego State University as her first choice from the list of 8 possibilities. She can select SDSU from the drop-down menu in this section, and the page will populate several helpful tables and charts about accredited SDSU prep programs, including staff contact information, expected time to completion, enrollment counts across various programs, student demographics from a recent year, and average pass rates on common exams and performance assessments. She can do the same for any other institution on her list to make the most empowered choice possible before ever going through the trouble of applying. Next slide, please. The second dashboard to note, which is really a series of dashboards, is our educator supply section. These dashboards are updated annually and support our reporting to the state each year about newly issued credentials and authorizations, as well as internships, permits, and waivers. Internships, permits, and waivers are the 3 basic ways that a person without a teaching credential can be hired into a classroom. The dashboard currently displays data from fiscal year 2021-2022. We are working now on the update for 2022 to 2023, and we expect it to be live by April. Users can click through various dashboards within this section to see greater detail in areas that interest them, such as bilingual or English learner authorizations, child development permits, substitute teaching permits, or services credentials like speech language pathology and teacher librarian services. Many of these subsections include 5-year trend data to supplement the annual reporting, as well as interactive filters for things like credential type, fiscal year. One note to keep in mind, especially for 5-year trend data in these areas, is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, as I'm sure you can imagine, the effects of school and institution closures, as well as completion requirement waivers, can impact 5-year trends in complex ways. So please do reach out to CTC with any specific questions you come across. Next slide, please. A final example of our public reporting is the assignment monitoring dashboard. The California Department of Education provides us with employment data each year in a flat file that we reference to our credential records. The public dashboard is updated annually. This dashboard reports what is called misassignments. A teacher is considered misassigned if they are hired to a position that they are not properly credentialed for, typically when a school has no other choice. The total misassignment count also includes vacancies, in which case a teacher was never hired. Just like the other 2 dashboards I've referenced so far, the assignment monitoring dashboard is interactive and filterable. Users can see statewide breakdowns of where misassignments are coming from by teaching area or school type. They can also filter by county and charter versus non-charter schools. And the second tab of the dashboard is similar, but is filterable by individual county and school name. So users can see misassignments listed by every district and every individual school in the state. One way to think about misassignments is that they are the downstream effect of teacher turnover in the workforce and declining new credentialed teachers in the pipeline. When schools face staffing challenges and cannot hire fully credentialed teachers to open positions, the number of permits and waivers issued that year will increase. Next slide, please. The final piece of CTC data reporting I'd like to highlight is our accreditation data system, or ADS. CTC staff created the ADS after updating teacher preparation accreditation standards and processes around 2016. And while she wouldn't let me put her name on the slide, I want to shout out my colleague Fifi Lau, because this is mostly her brainchild. This work involved turning shelves of physical paper-filled binders and a host of static spreadsheets stored in various staff members' files into a strategically organized and properly secured digital environment. But the creation of the ADS went beyond simple digitization. The ADS organizes and visualizes millions of data points into one cohesive interactive environment that is shared between California's approved institutions and the CTC's accreditation teams. In the ADS, every approved institution has a portal to submit various state and federal reporting mandates throughout the year. The deans, or equivalent leadership for each institution, can set varying levels of access for the faculty and staff that they invite. On each user's homepage is a link to a dashboard with thousands of data points relevant to their institution's active programs. This includes their detailed accreditation histories, neatly organized tables of their various program requirements, enrollment data disaggregated several ways, student exam and performance assessment summaries, comparisons to state averages or multi-year trends, and survey results by or about their students. The fact that program leadership and CTC staff share this environment ensures that data is never wielded as a gotcha in the accreditation process, but rather establishes a paradigm of support and partnership. Next slide, please. Wrapping up here, we are grateful and energized for our ongoing partnerships across the state and beyond, of which these are just a few. The collaboration from each of you is critical to the Commission's goals, particularly around data, including the following on the next slide. These are a few of our data priorities right now. Attrition within the preparation pipeline is a bit of a reporting desert at the moment. So we are focused on ways to identify and plug leaks where candidates fall out of the pipeline from the time someone decides they want to become a teacher to the time they are credentialed and hired. We also continue to see disproportionate completion rates for candidates of color, and we are committed to finding actionable solutions for anything that falls under our jurisdiction. And lastly, we are eager to bridge a long-standing analytical gap in the state between teacher prep data and employment data in order to measure and improve preparedness and retention outcomes. The Learning Policy Institute in particular has been an amazing partner in this, so a big thank you to everyone involved. And I'll now leave time for any questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share today.
Thank you very much to you, Kristen, as well as to Member DeGeer for opening up this particular presentation and discussion from members of our board. I'll look for some questions and comments in a moment, but just as a general reminder, please remember to state your name and your affiliation and to speak loudly and clearly as well. And perhaps I'd like to start with just a factual question. You mentioned that the data transfer in November involved 10 years worth of data, 4+ million rows of information, with some individuals kind of occupying multiple rows. How many total educators are we talking about in that submission alone?
I have not yet touched the original raw data file, but I would estimate that because basically the row level is the credential document, and then there might fall several authorizations within a credential document, and teachers might hold multiple credentials. So there's lots of ways that those parent-child relationships spread out. So my estimate would be, it would be anyone who had a new credential in those 10 years and anyone who renewed in those 10 years. So I'm thinking around 500,000, maybe somewhere in that ball field.
I think actually we have more than that. There's about 600,000 fully credentialed teachers right now. But then the data also holds information about credentials that, as Kristen talked about, were either revoked or not renewed.
Replications.
So approximately 500,000 to 600,000 thereabouts.
Maybe even more if there was renewals like 5 years ago, for instance, lapsed.
Members of the board. Member Vu?
Yeah, thank you. Tom Vu with AICCU. First, thank you for the dashboard. My organization uses it
Oh, good.
a lot. For two questions, for CTC, in the data transfer in November, you mentioned, data coming from the preparing institutions. Does that include all institutions that CTC, follows, or only the publics?
When I was looking at the data set, there was a lot of missingness in this column as well. I was looking at a sample of the data set, and I think that has to do with our credential application does not mandatorily link the credential application to the preparing institution. So going back in time, I think that field will be empty in the table. As well as if teachers are prepared out of state, then we wouldn't have an institution code for them.
But it would include the nonprofit colleges and universities?
Yes, as long as we have an institution code for them, I would think so.
Great. Second question is for C2C staff, actually. what's the overlap, I guess, or, what will be in the C2C dashboard that is not currently in the existing CTC dashboard? Alphabet soup here.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm happy to speak to that, and my colleagues can feel free to join in. We have a description of the plans for the teacher dashboard on the website that goes into this in more detail. But one component that you alluded to towards the end is that we have the EDD data with employment information. And then, as we discussed in the August meeting, we're in ongoing conversations with CDE about what data CDE may provide for the phase 2 of the dashboard. And so the original vision for that would be to be able to follow teachers from what you were describing, how they're being trained and earning credentials, to teaching, to potentially leaving the profession and seeing what the outcomes are, what industries they're employed in, how much they earn if they're no longer employed as a teacher in a public education school. So that's kind of the big picture vision. And as we discussed previously, right now we're focused on phase 1 based on the data we already have from our partners, and are working closely with our partners at CTC and CDE to build out what a phase 2 could be.
Thank you.
Member.
Meredith Lee, Senate appointee. Thank you for the presentation. To build on Member Vu's comment that AICCU is a user, I wonder if you could say more about the different uses that you've seen, whether it's educators who are just starting on their journey, or institutions or groups of institutions, and particularly, are there mechanisms for feedback across the different use cases?
Sure. Well, for the public approved institutions and programs dashboard, that would be probably most interesting to prospective teachers, as I mentioned, as well as education advocates who'd like to know how many programs prepare in this credential type or in this subject area or in this pathway. A big area of interest right now, as we've in the last 5 years started these residency grant programs, for instance, to be able to see. That's not currently a field right now because we're still figuring out how to engineer that. For instance, should residencies count as part of the traditional student teaching route, or should they count as their own pathway? And there's reasons on both sides to debate that. So education advocates, prospective teachers, on the accreditation data system, which is that one that's secured by user profile, you have to be granted access. Individual institutions use that all the time, hopefully is what it sounds like. And I was able to just actually show that to the Educator Quality Center at CSU a few weeks ago, because even though they have to report the data every year to us, you can imagine that there's a big effort from different staff members to compile that. And they're not really disaggregating, drawing insights, visualizing that. They may not have the staff to do that. So for all of our 100 to 250 institutions, depending on how you count that, they have access to just sign in anytime and see not just like 8 main tabs of that dashboard, but usually like several sub tabs within those, and see their own data visualized for them, disaggregated for them, with, broken down by demographics. And certainly in that case, they can talk directly to our team about feedback. We can give direct feedback to our data team that works on that.
Other questions, comments from the governing board?
Chair-elect Gavin Payne, this is a fairly parenthetical question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's not about credentialing per se, but California operates a fairly successful incentive program for teachers to obtain national board certification. I'm assuming that you've had conversations about that, but the question is that something that you're considering sort of molding into the database at some point going forward in phases 2 or 3 or 14?
I haven't heard about that. David, do you have a response?
That's not something we collect data on. That's something that CDE is, we're involved in the project with CDE. But I think it is something that we really need to look at. One of the things that I have been very interested in is finding ways to make it easier for our preparation programs to identify national board certified teachers in their area who might be interested in becoming cooperating or mentor teachers to candidates.
Yeah, excellent.
So there's a lot of opportunity for us at the commission, but I think for the Cradle-to-Career data system as well, to look at those teachers because the state's making a tremendous investment in that program, but also really having some astounding success in building a large cadre of nationally board certified teachers across the state.
Thank you.
I have a question. Kelsey Fuentes, Riverside County Office of Education and Cradle-to-Career Board Member. Thank you. I too use your dashboard. I think you guys can look up my credentials and all that on there for education. So it's awesome. It's amazing. So just thank you for the work. And I know you can't be here, but thank you for all you do. I just had a question about the type of institutional data you currently get from all the approved LEAs and higher ed partners in terms of student level, not aggregate, but enrollment type of data that you currently the commission gets right now
From the prep program?
from the prep programs, yes.
That would be a long list because for both state mandated reasons and Title II federally, there's a large number of questions asked about their prep programs, their requirements, clinical pathways. And so do you have any specific questions about?
Well, I feel just even just the fact that enrollment and what year and type, and I say that because one of the things that always has me excited about this process is being able to identify early on, you know, why are we waiting until they apply to a school district in my county to say, hey, there's these programs available to get you through the credentialing program, like the Golden State Teacher Grant. And how do we, now that if you have that data, we're connecting it here, we have the data from Student Aid Commission. Please fill up our classrooms with teachers. I need them. I still have to teach sometimes, you know, and sometimes we're waiting for the flyers and the announcements. And it's like, we don't need to spend money on more of that, but just imagine push notifications that say, you know, hey, you haven't applied for your Golden State. So just thinking proactively utilizing it because the data is powerful, but seeing the benefits down to that level is important. So you have this data. We have who's already applied. CSAC doesn't, Dr. Moldoff can speak to that, but has it, but that's just one program. And I know many more will come in education and they need to, right? We still have that shortage and we have all these different grants and organizations giving out to teachers of color. There's one coming out that I'm trying to not only teachers of color in the classroom, but administrators, right? Increasing administrators. And so they're external nonprofits or giving, you know, funding to school districts to do this, but already seeing we have this vehicle to be able to even identify early on. And I mean, before you graduate, right? Before I got my degree, to get a notification, we're so excited you're going to be a teacher and how do we connect? So just thinking if we're sitting on that data, some of those proactive opportunities we can to get outreach directly.
So one area of the commission's work that we did not talk about today is the 2021-22 budget created 8 career counselor positions at the commission, which are designed to work individually with candidates to answer their questions. You know, 25 years ago, there was one way to get a credential. You passed the CBEST, you passed the CSAT, you got your degree, and then you did your 5th year program to get your credential. Now with integrated undergraduate programs, with residencies, with internships, there are so many different ways to earn a credential that the question really is, what is the best pathway for me based on my experience already, a degree, if you have one. And so our career credentials are available to work individually with candidates to provide that information. And as part of that, they're also collecting data on what are the biggest roadblocks for candidates that they're seeing across the state. So that also helps to provide information for state level policy. Then something else that's been talked about in the Central Valley along the lines of what you're talking about is working with teach.org to figure out ways to set up a communications platform for people who are interested in becoming a teacher and connecting them to the resources of finance, of preparation programs and things like that. But then also going out and targeting people in our school districts, whether they are graduating seniors, paraprofessionals, parents of our students, to see who's interested in becoming a teacher and then connecting them to the resources so that they can find their own pathway. So those are two kind of exciting things going on along those lines.
Thank you. And like I said, it just currently we're sitting on data between two agencies.
Yes.
We could maximize this whole grant in 1 year.
And what was the other one?
And Student Aid Commission, just for
Yeah.
Golden State, we could close out that award this year. You know, if we, those are the type of data, if we're all coming to Cradle-to-Career, how do we do that? So we're sitting on awardees that potentially they don't know what they don't know. So-
And this does get at the heart at, part of what my time with the commission will focus on, that attrition within the preparation pathway. If we compare to California's peer states in terms of large and diverse, maybe like Texas, everything in the Texas education system, including their teacher pathway into employment, falls under TEA, Texas Education Agency. Whereas in California, we're just, like, the CTC was created to be an independent body, that was intentional, but now we are trying to figure out ways to bridge these silos. So we don't want any of those resources to go unused either. And I do wonder if perhaps, you know, CTC doesn't communicate directly with candidates typically. I mean, they come to us to apply for their background check or certificate of clearance, but maybe we could pass that information on to the programs and have those staff make sure that they're championing those as well.
Great discussion on a really timely topic. You can have the final question and comment.
Not a
And we're
question,
done.
just a request maybe of the C2C team. And also, we shouldn't tell Texans we consider them a peer state. I don't know.
They're pretty great at it.
They're great. I don't know if they would agree.
Just kidding.
It would be great if it would be easier to find the dashboard information on the C2C. And I clicked every button and couldn't find it. Just
Teacher data.
no on the C2C site. Like the description of the dashboards. It's great, and I had to dig. So just it's gorgeous and quite hard to find.
Thank you for that.
So one of the things that we applied to the Gates Foundation for Kristen's position is to have her meet with other data providers and other communities of interest in the state regarding teacher preparation so that we can find out little things like that. How can we improve our website, but also what kinds of data that we might have would our partners in education really want to know more about and have more access to. So part of Kristen's work over the next year and a half is going to be connecting with a number of different organizations to talk through the data that we have, what's available, and how we can help answer questions that they have.
Wonderful. Member DeGear, Kristen Calderon, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your contributions to the C2C system. Thank you for your contributions to ensuring a healthy and robust dialogue here amongst our governing board as part of our series with our data providers. We are right on time, so we're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll return at exactly 11:09.
Thank you.
Session.
We will now be moving on to our agenda item number 9, presentation on the intricacies of data ingestion and breaking down data silos. This presentation will be provided to us by Dan Lamery, Director of Data Infrastructure, and Liberty Van Natten, Governing Board Member. So let me invite them to the podium.
Hey, thank you, Chair Tagorda. Volume good. Good morning, members. My name is Dan Lamery, and I serve as the Director of Data Infrastructure. Joining me today is Liberty Van Natten, the current governing board member for the California Board of Education. I would like to refer members to the staff report that was created for this agenda item. you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. So as an introduction, I'd like to give a few updates on the status of Release 1.1 milestone. This release extends the functionality of the data system with the following features: data validation and the tamer infrastructure. Again, another highly ambitious milestone in terms of schedule, and we are on track for releasing in March. Next slide, please. So the first feature I'd like to discuss is data validation. The data submitted by the data providers goes through rigorous validation to ensure the data are of high quality. This is vitally important when matching data between data providers to produce the resulting P20W data set. The process for validation can be categorized into 3 buckets: structure validation, data validation, and data profiling. So the data providers are required to upload the data files using the RFC 4180 CSV, or comma separated value specification. This is an industry standard method for data transfer and includes requirements such as a delimiter, in our case, a comma, a qualifier, in our case, a double quote, and a terminator, again, in our case, a character term plus a line through. So the structure of the data, given the above specification, is then validated when uploaded to the data system. Additionally, the first line of the data file must, additionally, the first line of the data file must include a header, which contains labels that describe each variable in the data. The header is used to check that the fields submitted in the file match the columns in the database, both in terms of naming and in ordinality. These validations are necessary to ensure that the data file can be loaded properly into the data warehouse. Once the validation of the file structure is passed, the data values are validated and include the following validation checks: data type, referential integrity, regular expressions, and uniqueness. And I'll dig into each one of those. The first check executed is to verify that the data type can be converted from the character format coming from the CSV file to the appropriate data type in the data warehouse table, as defined in the file specification document. For example, integer values for financial aid can be converted from the UTF-8 character encoding of the CSV file to the integer data type in the existing data warehouse table. Additionally, the data submitted must be within a specified length. For example, the first name of a student may be up to 50 characters, and a value exceeding this limit would be invalid. Lastly, the data elements may or may not be nullable, or rather, that the data column may require a value to be present for that element in the record. If a value is required and the submitted record does not have that value, the record is invalid. For referential integrity, it refers to the data adhering to a reference in a corresponding table. For example, the CDS, or County District School field in the California Department of Education file specification is used to identify the school, and values submitted must reference a valid school code maintained in a reference table. Regular expressions are used to identify a pattern to match against. Some fields submitted may not have a reference value to enforce integrity. Instead, they have a range of allowed values for the field in question. For example, first name of a student may be up to 50 characters or alphabetic characters, not to include any other character types, so numeric. And lastly, uniqueness refers to the fields in the record that constitute a distinct record. This collection of one or more columns defines the primary key of the table. By enforcing this constraint on the table, no duplicate records can be stored in the table. Essentially, this is how we identify a record within a table, and to join it to other tables sharing a similar constraint. For example, an enrollment table may store student records for those, or may store many student records, and those records would be unique for a student by an academic year by a school. Moving on to data profiling, it is critical to understanding and the accuracy and consistency of the data beyond what is considered valid. That is to say, the records may have passed all the validation checks, but the data profiling reveals information suggesting the underlying problem, and there is an underlying problem in the data transmission. For example, if the gender variable for a statewide student demographics table only contained female values, the data profiling would reveal that and highlight a problem in the underlying data transmission. The office would then troubleshoot with the data provider. Similarly, if the data profiling reveals a sudden unexplained shift in data trends over time, that could identify a problem in the data transmission. For example, if the enrollment rate of a school were to drop 90% from a prior year, then more investigation would be needed to identify the root cause. And synthetic data. So no development is done using production data. No production data traverse the production environment boundary. This means that the development of the data system requires synthetic data to be generated for all of our testing and all of the validations before promoting the code to the next environment. Synthetic data is data that is artificially created to take the place of real data. And as part of the testing of this development, the team must execute both positive and negative test cases using this synthetic data. So positive testing is defined by providing a value input and returning an expected result. Essentially, data submitted must pass the validation checks described above. However, negative testing requires generating intentionally invalid data to ensure an error is returned. Next slide, please. Okay, Tamer infrastructure. So creating a comprehensive longitudinal data set from disparate source systems that have undergone their own changes, updates, revisions, presents many challenges. One of these challenges is that no singular identifier can be leveraged to identify individuals as they traverse through the system. For example, CDE does not receive data elements, critical data elements from local educational agencies that are necessary for the Employment Development Department, or EDD, to match and return work history of an individual. However, some of these elements do exist in other data sets submitted to the C2C data system. Therefore, the data must be linked and unified to create a truly comprehensive longitudinal data set. That is to say, individuals must be matched and linked both within and between the data submitted by the data providers. To do this, the records must be consolidated to resolve conflicts in the data and to create a singular source of truth. This process is commonly referred to as data mastering or record creation. The data validation and profiling steps detailed above are necessary to ensure the C2C data system contains high quality data that feeds into the master data management solution, tasked with matching and linking the data. Tamer leverages cloud infrastructure that efficiently and effectively scales the volume of data, both in terms of number of records and size of records. This cloud deployment of Tamer infrastructure is scaffolded following the pattern of promotion and deployment described in the previous Data Infrastructure Governing Board staff report. And the collaboration between C2C and CDE has been paramount and productive. The teams have met routinely every 2 weeks over the last year. This consistent collaboration between C2C and CDE is required because CDE data is by far the most complex, both in terms of scope and scale compared to other data providers, as defined in the participation agreement. Further complicating matters is that the data elements identified in the participation agreement are often broad concepts or constructs requiring the data to be combined or derived to achieve the spirit of the concept. A data element may appear trivial on the surface, but complexities may arise requiring subject matter experts to unpack. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Liberty Van Nett.
Thanks, Dan. So I am not the only subject matter expert, but I am the one sitting here hoping to explain the complexities today. So I just want to give a shout out to the team at CDE who has been just really phenomenal, and the team at C2C who have been by our side this whole time. It has been a labor of love, and we're really excited with all of it. So Today, I'm going to share one example of one individual student's experience as an attempt to illustrate some of those complexities of the CDE data and how we were able to come to a solution with the office to ultimately be able to take these high-level constructs and align them to individual data elements that could then be operationalized to meet the intention of the data system. So I'm going to talk about school address. This is a data element that reflects some of the complexities we collaborated on to come to a solution that actually worked. So as you know, the construct of school address is one construct in the participation agreement. It's a one line item, but this may seem like a really simple bit of data, but it's composed of many attributes. So things like street one, street abbreviation, city, state, zip code, latitude, longitude. So in addition to the CDE's publicly available California School Directory and associated pub schools files. So we have an interface where you can go and look up schools, and then you can have a downloadable file to accompany that. Those detail school attributes, and they are composed of data from different source systems or source objects. They are then joined together and updated daily. So these data are updated daily because the directory is a tool for the public to be able to search. So you could go and look for your kid's school or district, and you'll get current information on that school. So things like who's the administrator of the school, the grades offered, and for example, today, the school address. So to make things even more interesting, the attributes that make up this construct of school address exist separately from other data elements in the directory that are identified in the participation agreement. And these exist with their own detailed transaction history. So it gets more and more fun as we go into this. So in our work with the office, we had to identify the data elements needed to operationalize this construct of school address. But this is something that can change over time. So this is not an issue for most schools that don't change over time. But as we know, schools do. They undergo name changes. The administrators change. The grades offered change. Schools merge with other schools. Charter schools can change their authorizing district. New schools open and schools close. So any number of things can and do change with our schools. Now, this isn't to say that we don't keep these historical records, because we do. So in our live system, you'll see what's happening today, but we do have that historical information. Our historical records for schools and districts are stored in separate tables. So for example, we have a table just for changes in a school's administrator, and we have a separate table for changes in grades offered. And this is where things get interesting. So now I'm going to actually try to tell a story with this, a real world example to describe the complexities around school address. Again, that on the surface appear to be pretty simple. So I have a colleague at CDE. This colleague's son attended the same school here in Sacramento from kindergarten through 8th grade. So it was the exact same school, but this school actually moved physically 3 times while that kiddo was enrolled at that school. So this scenario created a challenge, a puzzle that we had to solve. We needed to be able to capture that historical data to paint that complete picture of a data element instead of a singular point in time. So we could have decided, all right, we're just going to give the most recent address. I think we may have talked about that, and we all said, yeah, that's not going to work. Because if we had done that, we would have missed the part of the story of this school moving its physical location three times, and that kid's experience moving with that school 3 times. So this left us with a puzzle. How do we take school address information from CDE's real-time data system, which lives in disparate historical tables, and structure it in a way that would ensure Cradle-to-Career received the most address information as is needed and specified in the participation agreement. So this example is literally just one of many that we worked through in collaboration with the office to be able to identify the data elements and then the tables and the structures and how they would be coming over to the office that we provide to the P20W system.
So I can't express how grateful I am to the team for this collaboration work. It was really phenomenal, very exciting, very satisfying to get to that point where, okay, here's our solution. We can hand this over. So I am very excited to be here today. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Liberty. So this will conclude our presentation, and I would like to pass it back to Chair Tagorda. Thank you, members, for your time and attention today.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Let me turn it over to our governing board members for any questions or comments.
Good question. Christopher Joelle, University of California. Thank you, Dan and Liberty, very much for that presentation and for giving us more of an appreciation of all the complexities of how to validate and profile and link all of this data that we have. So I appreciate all your work doing that. My question is given that the first dashboard data product that's in the queue is the student pathways dashboard, which will presumably rely on all of these linkages across educational systems and workforce. How do all of the challenges that you're encountering with validating and linking all of this data impact the plans for that dashboard? Are we sort of on track to produce a comprehensive and accurate set of data for that first data product, or are there other concerns for that?
So the short answer is yes, we are on track right now to be able to produce the dashboard, but there is a lot of complexity with it. Some of it's still unknown. But yes, to answer your question, we still are on track.
Okay. Thank you.
Other governing board members?
Just to follow up on Chris's questions, could you elaborate on what those are?
Sure.
What those unknowns might be?
Yeah, so we still have to do the identity resolution component of the mastering of the data and still linking the data. So I was describing the Tamra infrastructure. So linking the data is going to be absolutely critical for us to get the key necessary attributes to be able to send to ED, and then we get the wage data back. So that's in the sequence. Concurrently, we would also be doing the metric development for the dashboard. So we're on track right now. Until we get to those points, I would have more information to be able to say.
Other governing board members? Questions or comments?
I could, member Payne, Gavin Payne, this is a bit of a walk down memory lane. Hopefully it'll help underscore the amazing feat that you've undertaken. Back in the first days of the CalPads and what we were trying to do with the data system for kids that originally after legislation, I remember the first time that we brought a data dictionary to the state board for approval. That data dictionary was 2 binders, 6 inches thick, right? And that's just about one database, not what we're talking about today. The sheer volume and intensity of this kind of matching is phenomenal. And I just wanted to sort of editorialize that I'm really proud of the work.
Thank you. Maybe one more question or comment from a governing board member? I want to thank the two of you for the presentation, for contributing and helping us build upon our knowledge base of the intricacies of the data ingestion and this whole technical work. And now I'd like to invite our next presentation out, but thank you so much, Dan and Liberty. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 10. Presentation on California Health and Human Services contributions to the Cradle-to-Career data system. This presentation is the second and final presentation we'll hear today from a data provider. So I'm inviting up now member Ohanian, Ryan Gillette, Chief Data Officer, Jim Switzgable, Chief Information Officer, and Mary Chris Acon, Deputy Director of Children's and Young Adults Division, to provide this presentation. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, there's a staff report that can be accessed on the C2C website. So now I turn it over to you, Member O'Hagan.
Thank you very much, Chair Tagorda, and thank you, board members, for the opportunity to present. Very excited to be here today. I'm John O'Hanian. I'm the Chief Data Officer for California Health and Human Services. I'm also the Director for the Center for Data Insights and Innovation. Today's presentation will share with you our Cal HHS program and data initiatives at a pretty high level, and then how we plan to share key data with Cradle-to-Career as outlined in our mutual data sharing agreements. Today, I'm joined by my fellow colleagues, as you heard, from Department of Social Services, Department of Developmental Services, to share an overview of their department's programs and specifically the data we're bringing together as we move towards our mutual efforts to serve the whole person at Cal HHS and the state, as well as accelerate our agency's ability to deliver insights from our collective data programs. So let's dig in. This was all on slides. Sorry, I didn't tell your advancer. Was that back there? Sorry. Could you go to slide 4? Here, folks. I knew I was going to blow it one way, so maybe that'll be it for the day. All right. See that? And if we can get to slide 5. Thank you. Awesome. So for context, California Health and Human Services is one of the largest agencies in the state with over 44,000 employees and a budget of over $250 billion. Our secretary is delivering on his drive to build a healthy California for all. By doing this work to integrate, one of the ways that we do this is to integrate health and human services to drive these major initiatives that you see on the screen there. We are working with key stakeholders to break down department and program silos that are focused, so our focus can deliver these key results. It's really about bridging silos. It's really about advancing equity. You'll hear that time and time again from our secretary and our leadership. So if you look on the screen, each puzzle piece represents a focus area where California Health and Human Services is making considerable investments, including modernizing our programs and our data systems to become more person-centered. Next slide, please. Behind each of these puzzle pieces are various department programs and services. As you know, our 14 departments, each one of them may deliver 15 to 20 different programs, may have hundreds of services that they offer. But we know as individuals, we just need help. We know that when we need that help, it hopefully would be delivered, and we know what options are available. And so you can see a movement more in the health and human service space, nationally as well as statewide, and even in our locals, of bringing these siloed data sources together so that we can gain insights how to deliver the services to our constituents. Next slide, please. In July 2021, CDII was created. Much like C2C, the center provides an infrastructure for data integration and sharing. It helps Californians access, use, and understand Cal HHS programs and services. CDI works with California state agencies and external partners to deliver products and services to improve data sharing and analysis. And one of the ways, which we're going to highlight today, is through our agency data hub. Next slide. So since 2018, California Health and Human Services, Cal HHS, let's use that, has conducted annual record reconciliations that link, organize, and analyze administrative client-level records across major Cal HHS programs. Probably the former presentation spoke about linkage. And so these Cal HHS programs and services can include Medi-Cal, developmental services, CalWorks, CalFresh, child protection, and others. The data integration effort has resulted in the development of an encrypted master common client identifiers, which facilitates the exchange of statistical information both within and between individual Cal HHS departments, and the generation of important information about service involvement at a client and at a population level. We have core data sets, and CDII's intention is to continue to increase the data hub's content to provide rich data to researchers and leadership. CDI is very eager to collaborate with C2C. This time, we're really excited about today's opportunity and with our departments to ensure that C2C has the necessary data to accomplish its mission. Next slide, please. Just a few final notes because I didn't get into a lot of the technical, but can under questions. I want to just kind of move it along at a high level and dig in as necessary. Just a few highlights of the hub is that data cannot be extracted from this hub. It's really, the use is for analysis and program improvement. And currently there are a number of dashboards that CDII is working with our departments to develop, including an equity dashboard. Because one of the biggest things that I wanted to share is our efforts of bringing data together is really identifying what data is not being collected, specifically in our work around equity, work around gender identity, race and ethnicity really continues to bubble up, and we can't measure what we don't have. And so a lot of efforts in terms of data standards, working with C2C as well as ODI at the state level to really close that loop. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Gillette with Department of Social Services.
Thank you so much. If we can go to the next slide. My name is Ryan Gillette. I'm the Chief Data Officer with the Research, Automation, and Data Division at the California Department of Social Services. I'm here to talk to you today about the Early Childhood Integrated Data System, also called ECIDS, and how this is going to interact both with Cradle-to-Career and the agency data hub that John just shared some more information about. So this ECID project, I will also say, if anyone has a better idea for a name, we are taking ideas, so please don't be shy. But we are very early, we're in very early stages of development of this project with Cal HHS at the lead of this, but in close partnership with our friends at CDE and the goal of including a number of different data providers, which we'll get to in a minute. The hope is that this will integrate seamlessly with Cradle-to-Career going forward. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But we are building this within the agency data hub that John just mentioned. What's great about this is it allows us to take advantage of the infrastructure investments that have already been made there. But we also are designing it as a little bit of a separate carve out from the data hub itself. So it will live in that space, take advantage of the infrastructure, but will actually be fully sequestered off to ensure that the data here will remain secure and confidential. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the purpose of why we are pulling together an ECID should feel pretty familiar, I think, to all of you all. It's a pretty similar concept to, I think, what we're trying to achieve with the Cradle-to-Career solution, with a few key differences. First, ECIDS is focused exclusively on kids aged birth to 5. So this is a population in which data is particularly fragmented. I think we had a great conversation earlier with Liberty, where she highlighted some of the challenges there. But to just further illustrate it, the child care data lives at the Department of Social Services, but then state preschool data lives at the Department of Education. And then there's all sorts of other complexities that we will get into in a minute as well. So the reason that we want to go a little bit deeper on this is because we think it is such a priority population that we need to have some dedicated additional attention to it. And so what we will be doing with ECIDS is actually collecting a even more robust amount of information than just sort of the data elements that are specified in the Cradle-to-Career charter, to allow us to better understand what's going on with our youngest Californians. So at the most basic level, this will allow us to better understand gaps in services, where there might be potential childcare deserts, who is receiving care, who isn't receiving care. These are all questions that if we were only looking at one of these different data systems in isolation, we might not be able to answer, but by pulling all of that information together, we'll be able to paint a much more robust picture. Longer term, as we ingest more data, we plan to be able to conduct all sorts of more complex analyses that can support policymaking, questions from the legislature, and just in general allow us to make the most efficient use of our funding and design the best programs that we need for our kiddos. Third, ECIDS is initially designed to be an internal use only data system. The reason that we want to do this is because again, there's a lot of complexity with this. And so we want to make sure that we really understand how all the data pieces fit together, what's in them, what they mean, are we interpreting them the right way? And again, there are a lot of operational and policy needs that we want our policymakers to be able to take advantage of. And by keeping it internal, it allows us to pull in some more information and do some more of those robust analyses. Longer term, I think we're definitely open to conversations about, are there certain reports or visualizations that we would make more publicly available, but that is something that we would want to do in partnership with all of our data contributors and make sure that we all feel comfortable with the approach there. That having been said, our hope and expectation is that eSIDS will be able to be a complement and funnel into the Cradle-to-Career data system. We expect that we will be collecting all the data elements that you all will want for Cradle-to-Career, plus a lot more, as I mentioned. So once fully operational and once we have the full agreement with our partners, we hope that we could help everyone sort of skip a step of having to send data to places multiple times. They can send it to us. We can do the cleaning, the standardization. Obviously, we would do that in close consultation with you all as well to make sure that we are designing that in a way that then allows for seamless transition into Cradle-to-Career. But what would be great about doing that is that then we really would be able to have the ability to really track what happens from someone from the day they're born up until they get whatever happens with their career and their job going forward. One thing I want to say that this is not a master data management solution for all of the different data providers that we have. So yes, there will be situations where we're getting a similar data element from people, and we will need to internally decide for our system which of those values we want to use and we want to trust and what's more up to date and all that. But we will not be pushing back to them, hey, we see that this other data system says that this kid's address is different. Like that's not the point of what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay, if you can go to the last slide here on eSID. So this is just a little bit of a snapshot, again, to highlight some of the complexity of all the different fragmented data providers that we have. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but feel free to take a look. Again, we will be starting primarily with the Cal HHS data. So there's a lot of it that's at the Department of Social Services. And then CDE will be working, we are in close conversations with them about how to ingest some of that data as well and what that could look like going forward. Teacher credentialing, I know we had some folks here earlier from them. That's going to be a key data element as well. So hoping that they will working on setting up conversations with them. And then obviously information from First Five and Workforce Registry and Head Start. We're trying to find all the best ways to ingest that information too. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned, we are still pretty early in the development of this. We do have a vendor that's helping us build out this tool. And we have started ingesting CDSS data that we just have readily on hand. Right now, we're really just trying to understand what does this data look like? Do we understand the mechanics of how to get data into the system? Any issues or challenges associated with just the sort of basic functionality there. But once we have a chance to do that and then advance our conversations with our other data providers to set up the right participation agreements and legal frameworks to bring in that data, then that's when I think we'll really start seeing some exciting analyses be possible. I will leave it at that. We'll have some time for questions at the end, and I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Ryan. My name is Jim Switz-Gable, Deputy Director and Chief Information Officer at the Department of Developmental Services. Thank you, Governing Board Chair DeGorda and the board members for your time today. Today, we're going to talk to you about data elements that we'd like to have included in the Cradle-to-Career database. With me, I have Mary Chris Econ. And Mary Chris, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and thanks again, Chair DeGorda and the members of the board. I'm Mary Kusakon. I'm the Deputy Director for Department of Developmental Services, and I oversee the Children, Adolescents, and Young Adult Services. We'd like to introduce to you the programs that we have in the department and the individuals behind the data that we propose to share. So with the next slide, please, we want to share with you this graphic that may be helpful to help you understand our programs and the individuals we support. The Department of Developmental Services supports over 400,000 Californians who have developmental or intellectual disabilities. This includes cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, Down syndrome, autism, epilepsy, and related conditions. DDS has 2 distinct programs that serve individuals as early as the first year of their life, and more than half of individuals served are under the age of 22. The Early Start Program is an educational program authorized under Part C of the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Early Start provides early intervention services to infants and toddlers from birth through 2 years of age, who have developmental delays or may be at risk of developmental disabilities. At any given time, about 55,000 infants and toddlers are receiving services, and over 100,000 children in any year are served through the program. I would note that only 25% of these children are served, continue to receive lifelong services through the regional centers. Early intervention services are based on an individual's assessed developmental needs and the family's concerns and priorities. Some early intervention services include specialized instruction, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, assistive technology, audiology, and sign language services. The second program we have is the Lantern and Act program. It is the only entitlement program in the nation, and it supports individuals who have been diagnosed with an intellectual or developmental disability. The disability must have originated prior to their 18th birthday and is expected to be lifelong and lead to significant functional limitations in 3 or more major life activities. In recent years, specifically in 2022, the state added a new criterion to meet eligibility for the program. Provisional Lanternman qualifies children under 5 years old who do not have yet a diagnosed developmental disability and or have 2 or fewer functional limitations in major life activities. The Lanternman Act program provides services that are long-term and supports them in their home or in their community, in any community-based settings. The services may include, but are not limited to, adult day health services, habilitation, employment supports, independent living supports, and personal care services. And the next slide, please, is where we want to highlight some of the benefits of sharing our data. As I'll cover the first 2, and then I'll hand it back to my colleague, Jim. The first one is that the Cradle-to-Career does not currently capture data identifying individuals who receive early intervention services before their 3rd birthday. As I've noted earlier, 75% actually move on and catch up with their developmental delays, and so they exit the program and do not continue receiving lifelong services. The second is that we want to be able to identify individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and who are also regional center consumers. So highlighting again what John shared earlier, it's all about equity. We want to be able to share and capture data for this group of individuals. And then I'll pass it on to Jim to cover the other benefits.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Chris. Yeah, certainly. Also, we want to be able to gain insight from how individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities receiving regional center services transition through K through 12 and higher education into the workforce compared to the general population. One of the facts I don't think Mary Chris mentioned was that more than 50% of those developmentally disabled, which number over 400,000 now, are below the age of 22. So this database would really support our efforts and our mission at the Department of Developmental Services. And the final one here, gain insight on how individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities receive regional center services, advance through the school age and young adult years with consideration for statewide variations. We certainly have, I don't know if you know our model, but our model has regional centers. We have 21 regional centers across the state that provide those services. Through the Lanternman Act, the regional centers can establish the services the way that their community fits best for their community. It's a community-based program, and so there are differences between those 21. And so being able to see the impact of the different aspects of regional centers through this data would be able to help us as they move from early stages all the way through to their education and then into the workforce. So situations where the Cradle-to-Career database could offer benefits to DDS, researchers, and other interested parties by including our data. Next slide, please. Okay, so use cases. In the first example, first and second look like they're similar, but they're not. Compare third grade assessment scores among children who received early start intervention and those who did not receive that. One of the other facts too is that not all participants in early start end up being developmentally disabled. So certainly it's good to understand those that receive early start in the whole population of early start and not just those that became that were diagnosed with developmental disabilities. And then the second one is comparing third grade assessment scores among children who received early start intervention services and are DDS consumers and those who did not receive those services and are not DDS consumers. So two slightly different situations here, but it helps us to understand too how early start can affect those that have developmental disabilities and those that do not. Compare third grade assessment scores between the DDS population and non-DDS population who participate in the transitional kindergarten. And finally, compare DDS population and non-DDS population who receive a high school diploma and who received a certificate of completion and gain insight in the number of consumers that moved on to higher education. So these are examples of how we can assess performance of developmentally disabled populations in comparison to the general population with regard to services provided and milestones achieved and difference according to the different parts of the state. We propose including a developmental disability flag, an early start flag, and a regional center. And thank you.
Next slide, please. So in closing, we're very excited. This is a conceptual diagram, but you can take a look at it. We'll turn to questions in just a minute as well. But we're very excited to continue this work. We're very excited to have our data partners here. It seems like the timing is right on a number of fronts, both from C2C's evolution as well as our data evolution here at Cal HHS. So just real quick, putting my board hat on, I'd like to echo what DDS said in terms of the C2C board considering adding DDS data to its data set agreement at its next board meeting in May. And with that, we conclude our presentation and turn it back over to you, Chair Tagorda.
Thank you very much. I want to uplift, before I turn it over to member questions, just uplift what I'm gathering from this presentation, which is that through your own internal collaborations and data initiative, and through your interactions with C2C, you've unearthed an opportunity for us to shed light on a really critical equity issue for Californians, particularly among the most vulnerable and the youngest. And I can't think of another issue, from my estimation, that better signifies the whole point of this Cradle-to-Career data system, right? Being able to answer those use case questions that you had posed around really young Californians who participate in these various critical programs, and then being able to track their life's journey is a really critical policy question, a really interesting research question, and a really important benefit for us as a state to support these students, young students, and families. So I just want to make sure that that was what I gathered from that presentation. Obviously, we're talking about how the data will get integrated and all of that stuff, but the bigger picture to me, I'm struck by the equity, the equity agenda that underlies this particular issue. So let me turn it over to our governing board to see if there are any questions and comments for our colleagues here.
I can't echo enough what you shared and just thank you. I feel like, these are our young Californians that maybe can't speak and they're, they're babies. And I just want to say thank you for bringing that voice. And I want to share, in Riverside County, we have data sharing agreements with all 23 of our school districts. And we've done a preliminary, some of this type of matching data as well as with Head Start programs and with the federal side. And I think one of the things that, and I'm sure you're thinking about this and I don't have so much time to present, but what we found in some looking at that data, not only was there byproducts of the families, the adults in the programs, right? So when you look at a Head Start program, there's requirements that the adults, you must, give them information about post-secondary. There was other byproducts to the family and not just, the student. And so I just think as we explore this, I'm sure there's other layers of data, got to start somewhere, but I just want to say that it's a family unit and we literally tracked coming out of free and reduced lunch. So we did like a longitudinal type of analysis of what happened. And not only, of course, we want to see the bright spots of the literacy by 3rd and 5th grade, but we also found just some of their demographics transitioned with the services provided to the families when they were that young, especially, like I said, Head Start, migrant education. So just want to say thank you for that. And we're definitely not as sophisticated as probably what you're doing or thinking about, but we're trying and we're able to do that through our partnerships with our 23 school districts. So just thank you for this work and just other considerations. And I think with a lot of this, there's so many other byproducts that we haven't even tapped into, even going down to track them all the way to enrollment into post-secondary. So.
That's great. No, I really appreciate that. And I might want to chat with you separately about what you figured out with Head Start. That has been a place that we've dug a little bit into it, but one of the challenges we've encountered is we haven't actually found a good way to easily get all the Head Start data because a lot of it lives at school districts and it's a little bit outside of the scope of our very lean team to talk to. I don't even know how many school districts there are, but there's a lot.
For sure. But definitely something to start thinking about, and as you organize it, and set these type of data structures, it'll help them to start thinking of that. But we can't underestimate. I love when in a 3rd grade assessment, there's so many predictive analytics we can do with that. But being able to track them longitudinally with CDE data and other pieces is powerful. And ultimately, I think we always talk about return on investment, like in which programs maybe we're stronger than others, which regions of the state of California are having stronger results with this. There's not all programs are operated the same, and what are those bright spots to replicate? So thank you so much.
Member Nello?
Good afternoon, thank you. Just quick question. I think I read somewhere that the hope is to connect this to C2C in 2025, 2026 or so. That feels aggressive.
We're ready whenever you are.
That feels very aggressive, which is great. But I was just curious, so what is your timeline for your collaboration with CDE and getting all the agreements in place, et cetera?
Yep. So we're in regular conversations. We talk to Liberty a lot. So, legal agreements take time. But I think are starting from a good foundation there. I would say in the interim, like for the first round of data submissions that went forward, everyone kind of separately submitted their information. And I imagine that can sort of happen for as long as that needs to happen. It's a little bit hard to put a timeline on when exactly this will be up and fully running, just because there's a lot of elements at play from legal and budget and all that sort of stuff. But we have most of our CDS, we have all of our CDSS data, and we're making progress on at least the key HHS data sets as well. So it's not inconceivable that at least a portion of this could start coming from ESIDs in that time frame.
Thank you.
We have time for maybe one more question.
First, I just want to thank, John Hetz, California Community Colleges member. I wanted to thank all of you for participating in this. I know our system has struggled to understand the various elements of students' lives that come with them to our system, and having this data integrated into this data system is going to be exceptionally important. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of all of our colleges in our system. But the other thing I wanted to say, Gary, since you asked, It seems like you've built both a holistic and longitudinal data system. So if you called it the childhood holistic integrated longitudinal data system, it would be each child.
Love it. Get that copyright today. Just put Cal in front of it, we're good to go.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to revisiting this particular issue in our next governing board meeting in.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we will now be transitioning into our next agenda item of the day, which is the discussion, public comment, and possible action on the formation of the committee for the selection of advisory board members. I'd like to invite Mary Kate Cruz Jones, our Chief of Strategic Initiative, to present this next item.
Thank you. It's after 12, so I think I can say good afternoon, governing board member. I'm Mary Kate Cruz Jones, Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships, and I'd like to invite members to refer to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public following along, please feel free to check our website. Education Code Section 10865 states that it's the responsibility of the governing board members to appoint members to our 2 advisory boards, each serving 3-year terms. The Data and Tools Advisory Board is responsible for examining whether the data system is providing actionable information and identifying ways to improve access to that information. The Community Engagement Advisory Board is responsible for examining whether the managing entity is creating strong feedback loops with data users, supporting the evidence-based decision-making and analytical capacity, and ensuring equitable access to actionable information. In 2024, Data and Tools Advisory Board will have 5 open positions, and the Community Engagement Advisory Board will have 4 open positions. So there are 2 parts to this agenda item. First, we need to review and approve the charter, and second, we need to receive volunteers for the committee. So I would first like to direct members' attention to attachment A, the 2024 Selection for Advisory Boards Committee Charter. This committee will be tasked with ensuring that the advisory boards consist of collaborative individuals with diverse perspectives and relevant expertise, as well as enabling them to provide timely and high-quality recommendations to the governing board. Upon adoption of the committee charter, the committee will convene to offer direction and guidance regarding the recruitment process and the selection of candidates. This will involve examining proposed selection criteria, recruitment materials, and dissemination strategies. Additionally, they will assess applications received by the office and formulate recommendations to present to the board. This committee will need a total of 5 volunteers of governing board members. Before members volunteer, I want to remind members that the committee's activities will be happening in the coming months. So our first public meeting will ideally take place in April, and our second committee meeting will ideally take place in June. Again, the first meeting to review the application and the plan for recruitment, and then the second meeting will be the slating of after review of applications received. So attachment B takes a look at the committee who has volunteered in the past, in case that's a helpful reminder for folks as we look for volunteers. And I do want to point out that there is a tiny typo in the committee charter. It says that we're looking for 5 data and tools folks and 5 community engagement folks. It's 4 community engagement folks. So we're looking for a total of 9 candidates. So as I conclude my presentation, we have a motion in front of us. Staff recommends the governing board to approve the committee charter, designate the 5 board members to form the committee, authorize the committee to finalize the selection and recruitment materials, and identify a candidate pool as specified in the charter for approval by the board. And I will now pass it back to you, Chair Tagorda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Kate, for that presentation. I'd like to spotlight something that you briefly mentioned, which is acknowledging the committee information that's been posted on the C2C website. the inclusion of the current committee membership as well as historical membership is very helpful for us. Again, as we continue to build governor ambassadorship and our governance culture. So I encourage members of the board and the public to take a look at that. We'll now open it up for any member questions or comments on this motion, proposed motion.
I have one small position. So Jessica Moldoff, California Student Aid Commission. So is this number of openings what we're going to be expecting like on an annual basis from here on out? Or are we still basing the, I'm seeing nods, so yes, okay.
So it's not always gonna be 9. Like last year it was 11. So it's just how the first terms came, were slotted. But it will be a predictable 3-year cycle. So 3 years from now will again be 9.
Okay.
2 years from now it will again be 11.
Gotcha.
And yes, we will do this every year.
Okay, other questions or comments from governing board members on this particular proposed motion? Okay, seeing none is there, may I have a motion to move to approve the committee charter, designate 5 board members, including the board chair, to form the ad hoc committee, and then authorize the committee to finalize selection and recruitment materials and identify a candidate pool as specified in the charter for approval by the board.
So moved. Member Payne?
Member Payne moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Member Moldoff, second. We have a motion and a second. And now before we vote, let's pause for public comment. If members of the public want to comment on this agenda item, please note that comments should be limited to this specific agenda item. I asked Mary Kate if there are any speaker slips here in Sacramento.
No speaker slips.
And then how about virtually? Do we have any
So,
participants?
please, pardon me. If members joining us via Zoom would like to comment on this, please raise your hand. I'm confirming that I do not see any hands raised at this time, so I'll give it another moment. Seeing no hands raised, I will close public comment.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we've closed public comment. So Mary Kate, please do a roll call vote.
Member Tagorda,
Yes?
Member Payne,
Aye.
Member Cifuentes,
Yes.
Designee Elias for Member Cochran,
Yes.
Member DeGear, Member Evans,
Yes.
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Furgiueli,
Yes.
Member Gonzalez Vasquez.
Yeah.
Member Hetz,
Yes.
Designee Bierkey for Member Irwin.
Aye.
Member Jez,
Yes.
Designee Stivers for Member Laird,
Yes.
Member Lee,
I.
Member Moldoff,
Yes.
Member Nellum,
Yes.
Member Ohanian,
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Van Natten.
Yes.
20 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you for that vote. With the motion passing, we now move on to agenda item number 12, update on the Cradle-to-Career analytical tools. And I'd like to invite Ryan Estriado, the Director of Data Programs, to present this item. We will be receiving additional information related to C2C analytical tools. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair Tagorda. I am Ryan Estriado, Director of Data Programs at C2C, and today I'll be giving an update on the C2C analytic tools with a focus on user-centered design. So I would like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. And if you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, you'll find the staff report on the C2C website. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit of background first. Recall that the phrase analytic tools comes from the Cradle-to-Career Act, That phrase describes tools that make information from the P20W dataset available to the public. Past meetings, we've shared that the first two dashboards will be the teacher training dashboard and the student pathways dashboard. Now, when people think of user-centered design and dashboards, understandably, the first thing that comes to mind is data visualization. But to promote equity and access to data, I think it's important to think expansively and include the design of supporting elements like data documentation, the overall user experience, and the underlying construction of the data that powers the dashboards. For the last several months, the office has worked to establish what I think of as feedback channels in order to have conversations with the community and our data partners. And while the office works to master the data that we imported late last year and will import in March, it is also concurrently activating these feedback channels to get input from the public. And I think that this is important because the feedback channels give us two things to help us do design work now and build into the future. Those two things are a routine by which we can hear from the public regularly, and also a norm to get feedback on increasingly tangible items. I feel that with both of these items, we begin to build the infrastructure for continuous feedback and improvement for the data tools before they are built, but then also afterwards. So let me share more about what I mean by this, and we'll continue on to the next slide. Okay, on to community input. So this is the first of three examples. First, I'd like to share about the in-person community conversations that Mary Ann mentioned earlier. These in-person community conversation events are a series of engagement sessions where the office asks the public for feedback on a variety of analytic tool deliverables, including dashboard prototypes, dashboard companion materials, and the website, which will give the users the overall experience and use of the data tools. These in-person community conversation events are important for user-centered design because they are a unique opportunity to hear directly from people who want to use the analytic tools. So let's see some examples of what we've learned so far, starting on the next slide. This slide features a photo of me wearing nearly the exact same outfit. Okay. Embarrassing, that's okay. It's one of my favorite ones, but importantly, this slide shows a conversation that we are having with members of the public in Oakland. I'll talk there are a few lessons here that we learned as we took this information back, analyzed it, and compared it to other information we've had going all the way back to user research done in the 18-month planning process. But I think this is a great practical example. It's a direct quote from somebody at the event. I'm interested in data at the state level. I conduct research and advocacy to help improve TK14 systems. Another person said that they would start using the dashboards by looking at data at the school district level because they work at a county office of education and work directly with school districts who want to see their data visualized. And so what we have here is an emerging theme of people whose personal or professional life gives them a very specific question, and then they take those questions into their use of data tools to drive the experience. Interestingly, if you contrast that with the next slide, also a quote from the event in Oakland. I'd start data analysis at the state level and then drill down for detailed comparisons. So really interesting here. We got a bunch of stuff that was like this, but this is a really practical example of the type of things that people will say and that we aim to make use of to design the data tools. We've been reflecting on this and have started to think of this insight in response to what we heard. There are some members of the audience who come to data tools with a